immersed in, drowned in. A wonderful word used by a lot of Vedanta teachers, poets, and Vedanta writers. Even the Upanishad. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha. Yeah. So this Upanishad also used the word nimagnaha.
Samane vrikshe.
Yeah. Because on one tree there are two birds. That analogy in the Mundaka Upanishad talks about one tree and two birds and the cause of sorrow, because one bird is not acknowledging the other bird. One bird is busy building mental nests, all kinds of nests which it thinks is a place of rest, but is completely fully insecure, filled with predators, and it is hoarding berries after berries. It's a berryholic, a very, very bad habit of hoarding. And then the other bird this is the Jiva, the other bird is Ishvara. Where is Ishvara? Right where the Jiva is there, not anywhere else. In fact, the view of Ishvara is occluded because I have trapped myself in a mansion. Anishaya shochati muhyamanaha samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha. So likewise, this person nimagnaha, glub glub glub, even the Upanishad acknowledges this feeling of glub glub glub. And so even from the ancient text, the word nimagna is I don't know what we would do without this word. How to teach Vedanta, I know not. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, what other recourse do we have? People are still here, so that means the talk was effective. And what other recourse do we have other than to know the truth of the I? Because unknown, it causes problems. Known, it is free. Known, I know I am free. And so therefore, this Upanishad is without doubt, the Upanishad is to be studied. Adhyetavya, because Upanishad is female, so has to be studied. And that raises a few more questions. Upanishad has to be studied, You can say that in fact it's an injunction in the Veda. Swadhyayo adhyetavya. One's own Veda has to be studied. And the Upanishads are all over the Vedas. You find them attached to the Rig Veda as an appendix. But really, it's not appendix. People think appendix is not important. Yeah. But it's a very important organ. If you don't have it, you can get all kinds of immune problems. Somebody went for surgery, some other surgery, and then the doctor came out beaming as this person is slowly, groggily coming out of anesthesia. I took out your appendix for free. What is this? I didn't tell you. Did the appendix say, was it inflamed? Was there appendicitis? No, everything was okay. Then I took it out for free because, if there is appendix, there will be appendicitis. If there is head, there is a headache. Therefore, decapitate. You can't do that. So, the word appendix itself gives a clue to all the important functions that it does. And so too, it is the appendix. The Upanishads form the appendices of the Vedas, but you can't just cut them out. Even though a lot of Purva Mimamsakas, people only interested in the first portion of the Vedas, they don't even look at this. Why? They are busy buying firewood for yet one more yajna, that's all. And they don't even look at it. And so they are all over, they are attached to all the Vedas. But the question is, why is such an important thing at the end? Same thing can be asked about the human body. Why is it somewhere, at the end? If the appendix is important, it should be right next to the heart. It's Bhagavan's setup. So too the Veda is Bhagavan, it ensued forth from Bhagavan. It is Apaurusheya, not man-made, woman-made. No. Apaurusheya means out of the paws of human doings. Out of the jaws, out of the paws of human, intervention. There is no human intervention. The Hindu tradition does not have a founder. And this is our safest thing that has happened to us. All religions that have a founder, what happens after some time? The founder, Namo Namaha, dies. And the followers flounder, thinking, what did he say? Usually it's a he. What did he not say? And then they fight amongst themselves, and that one religion given by the founder becomes many. And there is a lot of confusion. For us, we don't have that problem because there is no founder. Rama was born into the tradition because of a yajna called Putra Kameshti that was already, endowed in the tradition. Krishna was born into the tradition. They are not founders. So along with then where did this spiritual guidance of how to lead the life in the first portion of the Veda and how to get out of this feeling of bondage in the second portion of the Veda called Vedanta, where did it come from? Did it drop from the sky? No. It organically came along with the Jagat. First, we have this is just not to be taken seriously, this is just for fun. We have a cosmology, it's true, but I'm just giving it a little bit of a comic twist. Ishvara in repose, no Jagat, correct? And then what? Because the karmas of all the jivas have come to a certain standstill, there is no Jagat. Ishvara is enjoying himself, being himself, and then suddenly one jiva knocks, another jiva clamors, third jiva says, let me out, I want out of this, just meditating all the time. What? The desire is born. The desire for what? To individuate. Like amoeba, 2, 4, 8, 16, like this. And so that process of individuation is the manifestation called this Jagat. It is not that Ishvara is a guy in the sky somewhere with a location called heaven and sitting there and making this Jagat, this cruel Jagat of strife, internal and external, and then watching, one more reality show, let me switch from one jiva to another nice channel. This is not our understanding of Bhagavan or the universe. So, tadeva anupravishat, that conscious being, quote unquote, entered as it were the very creation, the very manifestation, quote unquote, became the creation. There is no becoming here. Just like you enter into all the aspects of your dream and you pervade your dream 100%. There is no corner of the dream that is unpervaded by you. So too there is no corner of this Jagat that is unpervaded by the Creator, Ishvara here. And that Ishvara is also Satchidananda, same thing. That Jiva is also Satchidananda. Plus an epithet, what? Ignorant. That's all. And so because of this ignorance, there are desires, and the desires clamor to be fructified, and for that clamoring there is certain kind of, upadhis, various forms have to come into being. Because if you have the desire to, roll in the mud, you can't be a human being. You look most, most unbecoming. And after that, you have to do laundry. My God. Even though there are some cultures that roll in the mud and everything, but it's just very distasteful looking. I don't know how they do that. So the appropriate upadhi, hippo, yes, be in the mud completely. Make the mud pack into an art, into an art form. So like this, there are appropriate ways, upadhis, manifestations that come out, and it constitutes the Jagat. The whole thing is beautifully planned, including all the strife, including all the internal angst, who am I, etc. And all this is planned. And to negotiate that, a GPS is also given. The GPS is manifest along with the creation, thank God, because without that I would be lost. The Veda is GPS. Yeah. That's why the Veda has been channeled by, all the rishis, so many rishis. And sometimes their names appear, sometimes their names do not appear in the mantras. Female rishis, male rishis, rishikas, female rishis. And just like the GPS can be programmed to a man's voice or woman's voice, depending on what you like to hear. Here you can, you can listen to the messages of, men and women who have dismantled their mental mansions to be able to get the messages of, Bhagavan, of how to lead their lives, because they are in a place of objectivity. And because of this grace, they are able to give this to us. It's not that the rishis authored the Upanishads. They are mantra drashtarah, not mantra kartarah. They are not authors, they are not kartas. They are drashtas, seer. That's why the word seer has come. And that's why we are safe. And that's why the Jagat, in our view, is devoid of sadism of Bhagavan. There is no sadism because one is born lost, and along with being born lost, the map is already given. First the map, how to find the road. Because you're in the wilderness, in a big jungle somewhere. In the jungle, the GPS doesn't have a satellite, it will not work. But this GPS works. Why? Because it's a mental jungle, mind jungle. And so how to come out of this mental jungle gym is given here. First find the road of dharma and catch it, the first portion of the Vedas. Adhvan means road. So you find the road, the path of dharma, of sticking to a correct life, a life of righteousness where I respect others' rights just as I respect my own. And I don't, cut corners and make short shrift of my principles and values just because it is convenient. And therefore, I have one set, and I live by those sets. I learn to live by those sets of values. And once the road is mastered, then once I know how to drive on the road, then I can drive anywhere without getting into an accident. First, there is the drive to achieve a lot of things, but then one is told to stick to the road, don't go off road. And then one matures as a result. And that maturity sometimes comes in the form of despair, and it is okay. That maturity, makes one feel like I'm sick of life. It's not a bad feeling. It's something to be celebrated. That means one is ready to graduate from Veda to Anta, Vedanta. Yeah. Because, don't think that the graduation is always a big, always throw the hat and the cap and everything into the air, and then all these confetti is falling, and then a good time is had by all. That's just one little snapshot, selfie of graduation. Then you have to deal with the self, And so here too, in the beginning one is busy going on the road. The eyes are on the road like the blinkers of the horse, not looking here, not looking there. I'm so busy following the rules, and I'm so busy trying to be a constructive, contributive, citizen of this, the denizen of this bhumi, and I'm going to be productive and I'm going to achieve this. I have all these ambitions. Here, have a yajna, because the ambitions are not working. Why? Because other people are also having mega ambitions. And even if they don't have ambitions, their main ambition is to thwart my ambition. So how am I going to succeed? Have a yajna. Have a yajna means what? Resort to prayer. What else will you do? The hands are thrown like this. In some cultures this is a sign of prayer, and then for us it's like these hands which have been up to all mischiefs, we bring together. Stay quiet for some time. I bow, not that I have become a big bhakta. I bow in surrender and despair of my own prarabdha, all the blocks that are in my way of achieving what I think I want. And when that I want is dismantled and picked apart, what I want is to be free, what I want is what I have already gained. And so too chapter 2, which is Vedanta, or the last chapter. So therefore, I graduate to the last chapter. The graduation does not always look pretty. Yes. Sometimes it is done kicking and screaming. I know I'm ready, but I don't want to be. What's wrong with samsara? No. I think I should go to. I should not do this. I should just go. Come on, I signed up for the 1 month course. Let's go. No. But my favorite show is playing right now, and I'm sitting here. This is that. That's why the graduation process doesn't look pretty. Yes. That's why there is a little bit of a need of a mental resolve. And if one is lacking in mental resolve, just scroll up and down these names. And then you'll see, oh, there are so many people also doing the same thing. That's all you have to do. Scroll up and down, alphabetically all the names are there, and then immediately you get the spurti, the enthusiasm you get to cross over. Not in that sense, but to cross over from a life of becoming, which is very unbecoming, to a life of just being. This is what the graduation looks like. Most people, it is kicking, screaming, crying. Oh my God, will this work? That didn't work. And it's a desperate situation, because how much to pray, how much to strive, and nothing is working. Everything that I want, I'm not getting, and whatever I don't want is only coming. 2 problems. So therefore I make this transition. And usually the transition comes, the sankalpa to study and the sankalpa to really commit to this course of study comes and is the strongest when the life is at its traumatic best. Yeah, like a used toothpaste tube, one is being squeezed in all directions. And one is tired of giving, one is tired of just being in this situation. Okay, no more resistance. I succumb to Vedanta with a little help from friends. Yeah, there's one song, I get by with a little help from my friends. So I succumb to Vedanta. It's never the first choice, only in the books. Yeah, Shvetaketu goes to Uddalaka, Bhrigu goes to his father, and who else? So many people. Maitreyi goes to Yajnavalkya. Like this, very few. Those are ideal types. The rest of us are called, what is it? Madhyama Adhikarinaha. Yeah, Adhikarin, the one who is ready to jump ship. Yeah. Midstream. You're ready to change the ship because you have to leave the sinking ship in order to go into the ship of rescue. Correct? What if that also sinks? You have to take that quantum leap. So usually, the Uttama Adhikari means the person who is born qualified, very few and far between. Very few and far between. And those are there mentioned in the Upanishad as an ideal type. That is one end of the continuum, ideal type. What's on the other end? Adhama Adhikarinaha. Adhama means the lowly fellows. You tell them you are all glory. What? Why should I care? Wake me up later and tell. The ones in tamas, the ones who are not interested at all. And you might have shared this. Oh, there is a 1 month course, come take it. No, I think I'll wait next time. My call hasn't come. People who feel like this, all of them come into this category. Adhama Adhikarinaha. That also is an ideal type. Nobody is that Adhama really. What does that leave us? Right bang in the middle of the continuum somewhere. The rest of us belong to what is called Madhyama Adhikari category, where the desire is strong along with the resistance that is also strong. And so the resistance has to be dropped and the desire for this freedom has to be followed, and then one makes that transition. But then this is not fair. Why is it not fair? Because what about people who are unable to make the transition? Suppose they are stuck in the first portion of the Veda. There also you encounter Upanishads and Upanishadic-like statements. Ishavasya Upanishad occurs in the middle of the Yajurveda. In the Samhita portion itself, you cannot unsee it. Yes, you may use it for Abhisheka rather than study it, but that's not the Upanishad's problem. It is there. Mahanarayana Upanishad, like this, all these things are there right in the Samhita portion, in the bang middle of the Vedas, so that the boat is not missed. And so this transition, the quicker it is made, the more graceful it looks. Otherwise, one is in between the two ships, not a pretty sight. Yeah, one is doing the splits, yoga pose. Yeah, not fun. And because if you miss, again glub, glub, glub. That's what it is. So therefore, the Upanishad here, the Upanishad's sole, what's the word for it? Purpose and purport, the Tatparya, is not to save you from drowning, but to show you that you are not drowning. And this is very elegantly put in Mirabai's bhajan. Very beautifully she says, Bhava sagar sab sukh gaya hai, fikar nahi mohe taranan ki. She said she's looked for a guru to get some swimming lessons. How to swim in samsara. Front stroke, back stroke, butterfly stroke. What should I do to effectively negotiate the waters of samsara? And she says, Meera ke Prabhu Giridhar Naghar, ulat bhai more nayanan ki. My Guru, Lord Krishna, what did he do? He fixed my vision, revolved my vision, so that I started to look within rather than without. And what did I find? That the ocean of sorrow had been drained, sukh gaya hai, evaporated. So therefore there was no need to swim. So therefore it is a permanent solution. It's not something that is, that is in any way, a time-bound temporary solution. And therefore we have to take this solution seriously. And a few things about Upanishads in general. They are attached to all the 4 Vedas. Rig Veda, for example, has Aitareya Upanishad. I don't know what people are keeping on typing. Is there a problem? Headphones. How to listen with headphones Yeah, so to not disturb the family, yeah, well, that's good. But you know what? That might be something in your computer settings. So you have to look into that. Okay? Yeah. So yes, we can provide the bhajan, no problem. Then so Mirabai sings like this, that her whole outlook has been changed, and therefore to provide this opportunity, every Veda has at least one Upanishad. Aitareya Upanishad, Rig Veda. How do you know this? Because we study this and we understand it like this. And then Shukla Yajurveda, what does it have? Ishavasya Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Krishna Yajurveda, many Upanishads, Katha Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, like this, many Upanishads. And then Atharva Veda, so many Upanishads. Yeah. Sama Veda, Chandogya Upanishad, Kena Upanishad. And then Atharva Veda, Kaivalya Upanishad. What else? Mandukya Upanishad. And then Amrita Bindu Upanishad. So like this, so that you cannot, because see, the Vedas were classified into 4 by Vedavyasa, that's his name, because he made sure that the Vedas were protected by giving it to individual families to keep and to propagate. And so therefore the Vedas, come in families. So each family says, I am Rig Shakhadhyayi, Yajush Shakhadhyayi, I am a student of the Rig Veda, I am a student of the Yajur Veda, etc. And so, what if you are a student of the Rig Veda, will you miss the Upanishad? No, because that same Upanishad or the same message is given in a different context appropriate to that Upanishad. Very beautiful. So that is one thing that we need to know about Upanishads in general. The second thing is that it is not something to be believed in, it is a teaching, therefore it is always in the form of a dialogue. So there is the teacher, there are students. Like Prashnopanishad. There are 6 students, each one asks a question, that's why it's called Prashnopanishad. And the teacher's name is given Pippaladaha. And because he lived only on berries. Pippalani Atti Pippaladaha. So the one who eats berries, berry eater, and maybe led a simple life in the forest, living off of roots, fruits and berries, and got the name Pippaladaha, had 6 students, each one asked a question, and that became the Upanishad. Kena Upanishad, neither the students nor the teacher are named, but we know they are there because there is a very interesting interaction between the teacher and the students. And then Taittiriya Upanishad, is there a teacher and a student? No? Yes. There must be, because this is always in the form of a dialogue between the teacher and the student, a samvada. How do we know? Because there is a question asked. Aho vidvan amul lokam pretya kaschana gacchati. That elongated plutaswara. That elongated swara is to show the question. So after the vidvan, the person of knowledge departs from this world, where does this person go? Is this person also subject to the same vagaries of travel like the jiva who keeps coming back? Like Jack in the Box, Except that one scares oneself also, not just others. And so, is this the fate of the vidvan, the knowledgeable person, the jnani, the one who is, understanding the truth of oneself? This is all, addressed in the form of a question. So yes, very silently there is a question. It is there, the answer is given, the question is given. So all the Upanishads, whether the student is named or not, it is in the form of a dialogue. A special dialogue called Samvada. We have 4 kinds of dialogues in the Shastra. One is called Vada, Vada is like a dialogue between two friends, colleagues. Oh, let's go see this movie. No, let's go to dinner instead because I'm hungry. Then we'll decide about movie. This is just a vada. Then we have samvada, like the conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, where the student approaches the teacher and asks to be taught. And in this asking, there is a certain vinamrata, a certain humility, and the feeling that I still need to know many more things. I don't know. And even if I know, my knowledge is sketchy. It's peppered with vagueness, error, mistakes, so many things. So therefore, that surrender is there, and then I'm not constantly questioning the teacher. I have a kind of a receptivity, shraddha. Shraddha means trust and receptivity, with reverence to take in what comes. It's not a faith-based belief. It's a faith-pending understanding. I take the words until they are assimilated. I give an open mind. I give the benefit of doubt, and then I go from there. So this is what is called samvada. Then there are two other kinds of dialogues. One is called, what is that? Jalpa. The third one is called jalpa. Jalpa is whatever you say, I am going to say the opposite. I feel like it. Blue, no red. Yellow, no green. Today, no yesterday. Tomorrow. Like this. It's like two people who are in some kind of a cacophonic connection with one another. Each one is like a Tower of Babel. Each one is talking in order to be heard, but there is no interaction. Sometimes interfaith dialogues are like that. Each one talks about themselves and comes back. And then the last and the most horrendous form of dialogue or conversation. At this point, we have to use the word dialogue in quotes. The last one is called vitanda. Vitanda means whatever you say is wrong because you said it and I cannot stand you. Very biased, you see. So therefore here the Upanishad is always in one form of dialogue, which is what? Samvada. Samvada between the teacher and the student, and where questions are encouraged, because only through questions can the mental mansions be demolished and dismantled, so to reveal the truth. We are not shy of questions. We are not shy of any kind of a interaction, a deep analysis of the material. In fact, the Upanishads are highly analyzed and it is permitted. So many commentaries, so many things. It's like a 5,000-year history of analysis. We are not shy of analysis, but the analysis has to be objective. It has to come from a proper source, and that is what is vetted to make sure that that particular commentary is admitted or not. There is a kind of a vetting process. And then the Upanishad also has a certain kind of a, it has to be very clearly state what is the subject matter. What is the subject matter? Freedom from samsara. And what is samsara? The notion of bondage, which I mistake to be an ocean of bondage. When a notion is mistaken for an ocean, then this mistake has to be corrected. Like in the song of Mirabai. She thought the ocean was indeed the notion was an ocean. But the teaching of the Guru revealed it to just be a mere notion, so there was no need to go glub, glub, glub or find out how to swim out of it. So that is the subject matter. For who is this meant for? Who is this meant for? The subject matter is meant for who? The people who are going to malls and balls. No. People who are asleep. No. People who are in resistance. No. People who have lost the scent. No. People who are, refusing to come out of the blanket of the first portion of the Vedas. No. So who is this for? Adhikari is the one who is a seeker of freedom, nay, the one who is the seeker of knowledge. Mumukshu, seeker of freedom. Moktum ichchuhu. And then Jignasu, Jnatum ichha, the desire to know. So the one who has the desire to know is called Jignasu. Because the desire for freedom everybody has, including a housefly. I told you. Housefly is also mumukshu. Out of your hand it wants to fly away. But you have to be a jignasu. You have to understand that this freedom is notional. I'm already free, I have to see. So I have to be the desirer, I have to cultivate the desire for this knowledge. That's the difference between you and housefly. Yeah, so that's what it is. Every being, every jantu is a mumukshu. But you are a jignasu, that's the difference. And so therefore, the subject matter is for the qualified person for this knowledge. And if the qualifications are not there, no need to sit at home and cry. Gain the qualifications, cultivate the qualifications. Simple. Yeah. How? By having shraddha, by having staying power. I hated this class. Okay, the next class may be better. Stay for the next one. Next one I will not like. It doesn't matter. Stay for the next one. Usually I fall asleep in Vedanta classes. That's okay. After a while you will stay awake. Because Vedanta gives relaxation. And sometimes the relaxation transforms into sleep, unbeknownst to one. Because the sleep is the only form of relaxation one knows. Plus there is that, the blessing of Lord Krishna. Remember I told you that story? Everybody says no because they want to hear it again. Gudaka Devi, Gudaka means sleep. The goddess of sleep went and complained to Lord Krishna that this idiot is always awake, this human being, always restless, insomniac. And so what to do? What to do? I'm not able to just be anywhere. I don't have a place. This fellow is up at night checking his smartphone, and that lady is up at night with her tablet. And we don't mean the water swallowing kind of tablet one takes before sleep. Another, now tablet is something else. And so these people are addicted to their devices. They are all over the place. They are not sleeping. Where am I going to sit? I don't have a place, she complained. Krishna in all compassion thought about it and said, wherever there is Vedanta class, you go there, you will be undisturbed. Wherever there is Harikatha, my praises are being sung, you go there and sit. So therefore, no need to lose heart. One has to be perseverant. And that is what is the qualification. Gaining the qualification is part of this perseverance, helps gain the qualification. Titiksha. Being receptive, Shraddha, going against my own distrust, Shraddha, Shama, Dama, just that restlessness I allow to stop and sit and enjoy. And then what? And then I let go of my favorite TV show, Uparati, in order to do this. Single-minded focus. I know that some emails have come, ding, 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 sound has come, but I don't check it. I am listening. All these things. This is how I cultivate the qualifications. So the Upanishad speaks to the qualified person. The subject matter is that of the self as glorious and free, and then it speaks to who? The adhikari. The audience is the adhikari. Correct? Yeah. And the phala. What is the phala? What is the fruit? Yeah. The gain of self-knowledge, which is really the dissipation of ignorance. It's not that new knowledge is given. Ignorance is taken care of. That's what it is. Ignorance is completely taken care of. Ignorance is given the, pink slip. Please go. Yeah. You are right now unemployed as far as this jiva is concerned. No more you can be attached to this person. Please go. The ignorance is given. The pink slip is unemployed as far as this person, the adhikari, goes, and that is the phala, that is the tatparya, that is the fruit. And then finally, what is the connection between the Vishaya and the phala? What is the connection? Because the Vishaya, the subject matter, is what is the cause of the phala, correct? So there is karya karana sambandha, there is a connection. And the Vishaya is in the form of the book and is in the form of the teacher who has digested the book and who is what? Sharing the knowledge found in the book. It's a live teaching always. Because that's the only way to demolish these mental mansions. And so therefore what? Therefore the book and the subject matter, how are they connected? Revealer revealed sambandha, pratipadaka pratipadya sambandha. Between moksha and the book there is karya karana sambandha. Like that, there is all these things. These are the sambandhas, and this is what, this is a tightly fabricated, so to speak. This knowledge is tightly put together. That is why it is called Anubandha Chatushtayam. These fourfold things that make it an Upanishad. Subject matter, Vishaya, Adhikari, the audience, and then Sambandha, what is the connection between Adhikari and the audience, what's the connection between the book and the Adhikari, all these things. And then Phala, what do I gain out of it? All this is very, very clearly marked in all the Upanishads. And then, and how many Upanishads are there? What is the answer? Many, 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 many. 108 have been recognized, also because of the sacredness of the number. And Adi Shankara commented on 10 of them. And for this reason, and for this reason alone, those 10 are called major Upanishads. Yeah, it's not that they have joined an army and that's why they have been called major Upanishad. No, it's not a title. It's because that someone who was a stalwart thinker and a prolific writer of the caliber of Adi Shankara chose to comment on them. It is called major Upanishad. And of course, if those are major, what happens to the rest of them? Minor Upanishads. Like major surgery and minor procedure. Major surgery, Taittiriya Upanishad. You really need to join a 3-year course, and we can teach here also, no problem. But it is like that. Taittiriya Upanishad means it's a lot. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 100 pages of surgery. Yeah. And then lot of things are taken out. All kinds of tumors of, growths of self-ignorance leading to all kinds of self-judgment, strangulating me, are removed. Major surgery. Taittiriya Upanishad, big Upanishad. It takes a lot of time. And I have to have the anesthesia of Shraddha for a long time. Correct? I have to go under Shraddha in order to be operated upon. This is a major, big operation. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 100-page operation. Stinging the ignorance, a sting operation. Taittiriya Upanishad, another big operation. Chandogya Upanishad, 8 chapters, big operation. And then Amrita Bindu Upanishad, a minor out-of-office procedure. Equally effective. Equally effective. Yeah, that is how it is. This is also a surgery. But since it's small only from the standpoint of the number of pages, not from the Anubandha Chatushtayam. Not from the standpoint of adhikari, vishaya, phala, sambandha, not from the standpoint of the what causes the Upanishad to be integral and to have integrity, but from the standpoint of one's own, what's that? Limited look by counting the pages. So only from that standpoint you can say this is a minor Upanishad. Yeah. This is a small little, but local anesthesia. That's why you can take it from home. Don't have to come to office. Can sit at home in front of the computer, and before you know it, the tumor has been excised. Amazing. Yeah. This is not a small surgery. It is a small surgery because the methods are very enhanced. Laser surgery. Yeah, you just, you are sitting in the next country. No need to even come for medical tourism. And the beam goes and excises the tumor of wrong thinking. And this is what it is. Fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, this is the power of Amrita Bindu. Something called Amrita Bindu. Yeah, just a tiny Upanishad. Small little thing. Innocuous looking, ignored, and then it comes under minor Upanishad, but a powerful procedure that transforms the way of looking. So let us call it cataract surgery, which has occluded the vision from seeing what is the truth. The cataracts are being scaled down, in just a online operation. So the minor Upanishad, you can see, is not minor at all. It can be tallied with more, with more, perhaps neo-surgical methods. Equally effective, that's what it is. Whereas the bigger Upanishads, bigger in size, are more of exploratory surgery to find out all the things that are wrong. Sometimes you have to, even when the person is alive, you have to make that Y cut, Y cut means autopsy cut, okay? Yeah, and then you have to open everything and see what all is there that doesn't belong, and then take out everything, and then come to the conclusion there was nothing to begin with. So that's what is this. So there is no major, minor. Don't buy into that. Upanishad is Upanishad. It has Anubandha Chatushtaya. It has student. It has teacher. It has the teaching. But why can't I read the book? There is a book. There is that printout which is uploaded here. Why can't I read it and then gain moksha? Because you say that I really don't need to gain moksha. Yes? So why can't I just read it? Because it's a gain of that which is already gained. You keep saying that, yes? So then if I read it, it should be okay. Yes, but who is reading it? The one with cataract or without cataract? That is question number 1. Question number 2, who is reading it if you ask again? The one with a lot of mental mansions. Mansions including the ways of seeing. My own infrastructure comes in the way of reading. So you read Chandogya Upanishad, Tattvamasi, you are the cause of the universe. Next. That's what is going to happen. Or you say, oh, this cannot be right. How can this be right? This is not right. Why? Because the mental notions are filtering and bending the rays of the Shastra light. We talked about this earlier. So the Shastra is coming, if you are reading, it is coming through in a refracted, bent manner, in a manner that you are actually compromising its message. Your own presence is as though compromising its message. And so therefore you need live teaching. Therefore the teacher is a package deal. Whether you want or not, the book comes along with the teacher. No, but I only want the book. Too bad. Bad luck. Better luck next time. This time the book has come with a tour guide, the teacher. But who is this teacher? I never wanted this teacher. The teacher is the one who explains the book, not because they just suddenly have the desire to explain the book as however they want. They explain the book in the light of how it has to be explained, which has been gained from their teacher, from their teacher, from their teacher, going all the way to Bhagavan, from where the Vedas have started. So that is the best bet. So the teacher is a Shrotriya. Shrotriya means what? The one who has studied properly under a teacher who knows how to teach, who knows how to handle this Upanishad, which is no longer a book now. It is what? It is tools of surgery. It is a means of knowing something that I have no way of knowing. I have no way of knowing the I, which is the subject, because all the means of knowledge that I have at my disposal are to know the objects. More about that when we enter into the Upanishads. I only have a way of knowing the objects, not the subject, and therefore I need help, because my whole life has gone in trying to objectify the subject unsuccessfully, in vain. So therefore I need the subject. I need to understand the subject, the nature of the subject, which has to be taught to me. So that's why this means of knowledge has to come from outside in the form of the microphone of the Upanishad, which is the teacher. It just amplifies the message, just like this microphone. It's helping you to hear what is being said. If the microphone started to have its own thoughts, I just only speak after I have my own thoughts. I'm tired, I'm alone, I need a friend. Why should I keep, amplifying your thoughts? They are not that great. If the microphone started to have its own thoughts, we are in peril. Microphone is effective when it is just an amplifier. So the teacher is the amplifier of the message of the Upanishad in a way that it is heard through the din of samsara. That's what it is. So the teacher comes along with for free, no charge. Freely the teacher comes, and then the teacher handles the Upanishad, which now becomes tools for surgery, and the tools are those tools which are denied to me. Why? Because they are not under my, safekeeping. I only have been endowed with those tools that that keep on reinscribing the subject-object difference, not with the tools which obliterate or show that there is no difference between that. The object resolves into the subject alone reigns. There is no such tool. I need this tool, and the tool is in the form of the teacher, is in the form of the teaching that comes. So the teacher has to be a Shrotriya. If anybody in our tradition says, I got this knowledge apne aap, we say, please keep it and enjoy it, don't give it to me. If you got this knowledge by yourself, you keep it, please don't give it to me. We don't go for this apne aap business at all. Shrotriya, the one who has studied from his teacher or her teacher effectively, who comes from a sound lineage which does not distort the message of the Upanishad. And then ideally the teacher will also be a Brahmanishtha. Brahmanishtha means the one who has commitment to Brahman, committed to the learning, committed to the ways of being, committed to the knowledge completely. And that is what immersed in the knowledge, and that is what makes this interchange, this samvada effective. So that is how the Upanishad is taught. And even in the Upanishad, that's why we have teacher student. That's why we have no Upanishad, whether major or minor, where the student said, come along folks, a group of students say, we'll sit and read. We'll sit and read what our foremothers and forefathers have written. Nowhere. This is an oral tradition, a verbal tradition. It's called Karna Parampara. Karna Parampara means from the mouth of the teacher to the ear of the student. And that ear is a ripe ear, like the ripe ear of corn. What does the ripe ear of corn do? It bends. So this ear is bending in supplication because it has a desire to hear. So like the ripe ear of corn, this ear also hears and assimilates, and then it is able to give that what it is assimilating, what it has assimilated, to other eager ears. That is the effectiveness of the parampara, and that is how this is delivered, and that is how it has been delivered from ages and ages. And even though we may be thinking, here that we are using new formats, what is that, live streaming, and this, this some kind of interactive modes and all these things. Nonetheless, the teaching is 1000% traditional and delivered in the most traditional way possible. That is why it makes it effective. Oh, is it as effective as sitting in somewhere in some other country in front of the computer? Yes. Why? Because the small print in Vedanta is that, what does it say behind the packet? It's all about you. Pun intended. It is all about you. The teaching is all about you. The extent to which you are able to assimilate the teaching, all about you. The extent to which you have receptivity, shraddha, lack of distractions, and the way that you are able to make this effective, it's all about you. The ball is in your court. This is what the whole thing is. And so, so now coming to this Upanishad, we have to land at some point. So now we have what? Seat belted, and then what? We are slowly descending, and weather is clear, and then we can land a little bit. And then we take off again in the next class. So we have to land here a little bit. And so the final stage, what is this? This is one of the Upanishads, comes under the 108, what is called Amrita Bindu Upanishad. And like I said earlier, there are 5 Upanishads with the title Bindu. Yoga Bindu, Nada Bindu, Dhyana Bindu, Tejo Bindu, and Amrita Bindu. Amrita Bindu is the most well known. It's kind of the leader of the 5 pack of the Bindu Upanishads. But what is the meaning of Bindu? Sadly, sometimes translated as drop. Amrita Bindu, Amritasya Bindu, a drop of immortality. Are you happy with a drop of immortality? No, that's just, that's just, if you do yoga, you'll have a little extension of life. That's a drop. If you do pranayama, 5 more years. So, nobody is interested in a drop. So, it is the word Bindu, it means a drop, one of the meanings. And then we have to reconcile Amritasya Bindu. How are we going to explain this? That's a head scratching moment. That is a head scratching moment. And then, but more effectively, I think Bindu is translated from the tantric standpoint as the center, Kendra, as a center, as a PowerPoint. Yeah, that's how the Microsoft Word got its PowerPoint program. Yeah, Bindu, a center of power, a point of power, a PowerPoint, a powerful point. Yeah, all points to the Jiva here. Amrita Bindu, Amritasya Bindu, a drop of immortality. I heard somebody say, that it's like a vaccination. This Upanishad, all you need is a drop. It's a vaccination. A very ingenious way to look at it. Maybe that's one way to reconcile, a drop of immortality. But Sanskrit has a beautiful grammar, and you see the compound Amrita Bindu, Shashti Tatpurusha, 6th case compound, a drop of immortality. Or we can take it in the passive sense, karmani sense, a drop for which the subject matter is immortality. Then the immortality is not compromised. Karmani Shashti, in the sense that who is this drop? This jiva who thinks I'm just dropped here. I'm a useless, pointless fellow. I'm just a little drop in this ocean of samsara. I am just this little drop among all the jivas. I am this drop. But the drop really is an immortal, is immortal. The drop really, the subject matter of this drop is nothing but immortality. So you better to take it from the Karmani Shashti, from the sense of the object case of the sixth case, in the object sense, not in the subject sense. In the subject sense, we have a drop of immortality. When you take it from the object sense, you have that drop for whom the subject matter of which is immortality. So the drop needs immortality, otherwise it's ready to drop out of life. It's ready, it is sick, it is very upset. So therefore this lends better to our understanding. More we shall see next time. Today we are not done yet. For those who are not, for those who still have stamina, are welcome to come to the Manisha Panchakam at noon, our time, and then Panchadashi at 4 o'clock. Very busy day because it's the weekend. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Yeah, write down your questions and email. I will answer them. Yes, see you this evening. Sometimes Mirabai Bhajan, I will give you the words of it, no problem. You may have to remind me again. And distinction between Atma and Jiva. Jiva is the one who is Atma plus ignorance. Okay? Yeah. That's what. In short. All that will become clear. Okay. Om. Happy day, happy